trying to not date out of a place of scarcity, because obviously it's so easy to be like, there's no good men around, or like everyone's married, or like I'm getting older. And that leads you to these dates where you end up sitting there looking depressed.
Just because somebody goes to church doesn't mean the church is in them.
It's much more intentional. So while there may have been more of like a serial kind of dating vibe in my 20s, now it's like I don't want to say I'm fussy, but I know my worth.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Magnify Conversations. If you're new to Magnify, firstly, welcome. It's great to have you. Magnify is a platform focused on empowering ambitious women of faith to thrive in every area of our lives. I don't know about you, but I sometimes find faith can be really challenging and difficult to speak about in today's world. And that's why we've created this podcast.
The Magnify Conversations are all about bringing everyday, authentic women together to discuss faith, relationships, career, whatever's kind of important that we're speaking about at the moment.
My name is Ruth, and I'm the founder and CEO of Magnify.
And I'm Rachel, and I'll be the host of the Magnify Conversations.
So if you like this episode, don't forget to share with a friend, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel.
Welcome to the Magnify Conversations. Today we're chatting about dating in our 30s with guests Chui, Aboderin and Delphine, Chui. Chui is a fashion and business lecturer and style director of Potential You, a style and image consultancy for professional women. Delphine is a writer who presents on different lifestyle trends, faith-based advocacy and dating. She also runs her own befriending charity, Care Dogs. Let's get into this conversation. So we'll start with a few quick-fire questions, just to get to know you a little bit. Chui, we'll start with you. What is the best life advice you've ever received?
Oh, wow. Get on the dance floor of life.
Oh, like that.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I feel I've had so many, but one that's always stuck in my head is my first boss always said to me, whenever you're in a new situation, be a sponge and just absorb everything and then make your decision, make your mind up, and then you can really make your mark and show who you are. I think that's really good, because otherwise sometimes you can come in and just like a wrecking ball and be like, this is my opinion and this is everything. So it served me quite well, just being able to sit and listen and appreciate and, be reciprocal and just, really receive and then be able to give some Delphine.
That's good. Give some Delphine. What world record do you think you've got a shot at beating? It doesn't have to be a real one. It can be just one that you completely make up.
The world's best stylist.
So.
Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like this kind of confidence.
Maybe like animal whisperer. I did hear in the makeup room that there are some non-animal fans, but I've managed to make a cat and dog like really get on, which is just wonderful. And they're both rescues, and like it was like Tom and Jerry at first, and now they like sleep on the same bed together.
Amazing. And obviously the conversation today is all around being single in our 30s, right? Complex, good, high, low, like everything in between. And we'll be hearing both of your stories and your experiences of that. I think quite often that seems like it's a sickness that needs curing by everybody else. It seems that everybody else has a view on our relationship status anyway, but I think especially the 30s seem to be quite a key time for that. And I know you've both got loads of stories to tell, experience in the middle of that. And so we're going to get right into that conversation. So how important has the idea of marriage been to you, Chui?
Oh, very important. I think that, when you're young, you have all these plans. I thought I'd go to university, finish at 21, meet the man of my dreams, be married at 21, enjoy a bit of life, have a baby at 25, and then we'll live happily ever after.
Sounds very planned out. I'm guessing that didn't happen.
Didn't quite happen like that, but that was the plan. Yeah, that was definitely the plan.
Delphine, how about you? Is marriage something that you think about? How important has it been to you?
Yeah, I think just as a theme, like I always almost expected it, or maybe there was like a feeling of entitlement, just like this is what's going to happen, like I'll become a wife and a mother. And I didn't quite have the same timeline. I think when the environment I was in, marriage wasn't really talked about in like early 20s, for example. So my timeline was like engaged at 27, married at 28, first child at 29. And obviously God's like, excuse me, like obviously there's that scripture that says, man plans his steps, but actually the Lord establishes them. And yes, I've been humbled because that didn't happen, but it's always been a dream for me.
Yeah, and it would be good just to hear then a bit of your, just experiencing your 20s and your 30s, like just who you are, a little bit about who you are, your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born a Catholic, but almost like a bit cultural. I didn't really have the community I needed. I didn't have the formation, and I just strayed away from the faith, really, I think, at university. And I didn't stop believing in God, but I didn't have that personal relationship. And then my 20s, I think dating was very just integral to the culture. Like, your relationship status was part of your value and your worth. And of course, we know that that's not at all how it is. We all have inherent dignity and worth. So at the time, I think, my 20s, I was like, okay, I've got a boyfriend and we're doing all these lovely things and I can post about it on Instagram. And it really felt like an extension of my identity. And it was very codependent. You know, now I really realize that relationships are meant to be like complementary. So my 20s, I was in long-term relationships. And I think deep down, I always thought, well, why would you date someone you wouldn't want to marry? And so many people would say, like, that's crazy. Why are you thinking like that? And I remember when I was 25, I was asked to write a piece that was called Old Before Your Time, because I was like wanting to get married. I really wanted to try and save for a flat. And everyone was like, that's just crazy. Your 20s are meant to be experimental. You're meant to not be tied down to anything, not a man, not a mortgage. And it was this pivotal moment in my life when I started thinking, oh, are these like dreams and these desires I have in my heart, are they wrong? Are they not actually what I'm meant to do? So I think that led me astray, unfortunately.
You're married now, Joy. Do you mind me asking how old you are?
47.
And I've asked anyway. Wow. Okay, I've asked anyway, so it's too late. So could you tell us a bit of your journey then to get into that point? Because you were single for a long time in your 20s and 30s. Can you just kind of tell us about that time? Tell us a bit of your timeline and story around up to the point of getting married.
Okay, so I'd say that my 20s were the years of fun. So I was brought up in a really strict Christian home. So university was like emancipation. And we went wild, we clubbed, we just enjoyed ourselves and just felt free. And I would say my dating was very fun. It wasn't really, I probably had a few serious relationships, but nothing really long term. And then I'd probably say that then I had a really terrible heartbreak in my late 20s that got me into a real deep depression for about 2 years, I'd say. And then I'd say a zombie state for about 3. So I wasted like 5 years of my life just trying to get over it because I thought that we were going to get married. He'd met my family, and it was really tough on me. I really lost my identity, my self-worth, and I felt that there was something wrong with me. And then I got really deep into God, and he gave me my self-worth and my confidence. And then I'd say that my 30s were, I dated with intention when I came out of the zombie stage. I dated with intention. I wanted a man that I thought about marriage. I thought about the qualities I wanted in a man. But it wasn't easy because I would date guys in church thinking that they would be really good guys. And that wasn't always the case. Just because somebody goes to church doesn't mean the church is in them. So it wasn't easy. And I'd probably say that I was a serial dater in my 30s. Most of them were short and sweet. And then one day I went to a church and met my husband. And we went for a walk, and the rest is history.
Okay, wow. And you've both just spoken about how in your own timelines, like when you were younger, you kind of had this ideal age. It's kind of like, oh, this is where I'm going to be married. This is where I'm going to be having children. Joy, it was young for you. It was slightly older for you, Delphine. You're now married, but going back to the time, Joy, where you were single in your 20s, 30s, you're going through like these serial dating experiences. At that time, did you ever feel you had to like grieve the life that you thought you would have by that point, if that makes sense?
I think when I had the heartbreak, I definitely grieved. I remember there was a lady at my gym that said I'd lost so much weight. She said, oh, you're grieving. I was grieving the life I thought I would have. And because, you know, I just planned everything around that relationship. In a way, I think I probably idolized it in hindsight, where you just build everything around the man and your future together. So when that relationship disintegrated, I couldn't see the future. So I was completely lost. So I would say that I grieved the loss of that relationship. But I think the good thing was that I then clinged onto God deeply. Like my relationship with him really deepened. And I found my identity again in him. I got my strength back. I got my identity back. So my identity is not in a man. My identity is not in anybody. My identity is in God. So then I was confident as a single woman, and I was whole because I was absolutely devastated at the loss. So he really had to build me up. And he has. I would say that I'm really confident. By the time I met my husband, I was confident. And by the time I was dating with intention, I was confident. I knew what I wanted. I knew my worth. I knew my value. I knew it wasn't in a man or in a relationship, but my identity was in God. So I even say to my friends now, one of them, I spoke to her 2 days ago, she's single, she's in her early 40s. And she's really struggling, really down, crying about it. And I said, I need you to put Post-it notes of what God says about you all over your house, not in the guy that treated you badly, because that's who he is, but that's not who you are, who God says you are. God says that you're wonderfully made. God says that you're the apple of his eye. He says that he knew you in your mother's womb. Before he knitted you together in your mother's womb, he knew you. And he didn't say that because you're single or married. And when Eve met Adam, she was whole because it was 1 + 1 = 1. So see yourself how God sees you, not in how people treat you, because people will treat you badly. People will treat you badly, people will treat you well. You can't let how people treat you affect how you see yourself. Use God's mirror to see yourself. So yeah, it really was a time of learning, a time of growth. It was like the house broke down and then God built it back up again. Yeah, so I think it was necessary. Obviously, when you're in the pain, you don't see it. But now I see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Delphine, when those like ages had come and gone for you, were you consciously then thinking about, oh, I kind of thought I'd be married by now. I thought I'd be, maybe thinking about having kids by now.
Oh,
were you
absolutely.
conscious of that, or were you just kind of going through life at that time?
Oh, no, I was very conscious. Like, actually, I was just nodding the whole time Joy was speaking. I resonate with that so much, like idolizing marriage, idolizing relationships, and having this breakup, which is, in place of deferred hope, because you have all your hope in this person. You're like, we're going to get married, we're going to have children, and you imagine what they're going to look like, and all these things, which obviously, not holding your thoughts captive. My imagination can be my worst nightmare, because I can be like, oh, but I really saw it happening and I could really feel it. So no, the grief is real. The grief is real, the grief of the life. And I think especially now, similar to Joy speaking about your 20s being this kind of time of fun, like when I hit 30 is when God really called me home. Like I had such an intense reversion and conversion. And I think when I finally started to realize, oh, this is what marriage is about, this is what love is about, I then grieved all these years that I was operating from a completely different space of codependency and just trying to be part of the culture.
Yeah. How has dating differed for you then between your 20s and now you're coming up to your mid-30s?
Yeah.
How you sound scared about that.
I am. I'm like mid-30s. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, it doesn't sound that great, but it is okay.
No.
How has it differed? Because right in the middle, you say around your 30th birthday, you've had a decision where you've just really chosen to follow God. So what has been the difference between dating in your 20s and dating in your 30s?
It's intentionality, because, in my 20s, it was like I was all about the Hollywood romance, like falling in love. It was never a decision. It was like, oh, I've just found myself in this situation and now, we're together. So now it's much more intentional. So while there may have been more of like a serial kind of dating vibe in my 20s, now it's like I don't want to say I'm fussy, but I know my worth and I know the time, what I want to do with my time, and I want to glorify God. And if I don't see a future or something with someone, I don't do it just for the, to make me feel better or to fill my time. Because that's the thing, dating can become a hobby and it can almost become like a crutch, because you feel like you're getting this need met, but it's not really real.
And in your 30s, what's your experience been like of dating men who maybe are on a different wavelength in terms of their dating journey? So you've said, I'm not just doing this for something to do, like I know who I am, I know kind of what I want. Have you had experience of going on dates where it's been like, okay, we're just not on the same wavelength.
Yeah, I think the thing about confidence as well is you can see if someone is serious, because I was having like I'd meet this guy at church and then he'd be all like texting me and really sweet. And then it was like either ghosting or just like very random communication. And I'm like, I'm not going to chase you. Like, you know, they say the sperm chases the egg. Like, you were meant to pursue me. I'm not going to be there like, oh, how come you didn't reply to my text? So I would see these bouts of guys who'd be super, super interested and enthusiastic, and suddenly like would pull back. And that's their own kind of growth that they need to realize about what they want and commitment. And there are a lot of, unfortunately, I'm sure women as well, but men who just don't act on what they say. So they say everything you want to hear. And then on the flip side of that, I have also met some really lovely men who are very like, they want to be married and they want to be husbands and fathers, and they're serious about that. And then you also get the others who get a little bit too impulsive about that. And it's like, okay, like talking about proposals very, very, very soon. So I think there is a mix of intentionality on the man's side and also just like bumbling through it. And that's the kind of dating experience I want to try to avoid, because I'm like, it's taken me so much self-work to get to this place where I hopefully am not just bumbling my way through dating anymore, that I don't want to get pulled back by those games. Because there's so many games, like ghosting, gaslighting, love bombing, all these. I know these are very like modern terms, but they do describe what some people do.
Yeah. Joy, what about your experience then in your 30s? So you'd become more intentional, like you kind of knowing who you are. Did you go through an experience where you've been on dating different guys who just the wavelength's not there? And I don't mean that in an arrogant sense, like, oh, I'm so much better than them, but more your perspective of, I know who I am, I know that I want to settle down and maybe have kids, all the rest of it.
Definitely. I've got loads of stories, actually.
Do you care to tell it?
Yeah, of course. I remember there was once I was in a Chinese restaurant. I even laugh now thinking about it. And my friend came in while I was on this date with this guy. Somebody in my church recommended us to go on a date. And I thought, okay, let me go on a date with him. And she said, I'd never seen you looking so depressed before. I was just there, and I wasn't really that interested. And I just thought from then on, only go on dates with people that you see potential with and be intentional about. So if you're far too sexual, you're crossed off. If you want to come to my house and you don't really want to take me out, and your faith is really important, not what you say, but how you behave. So even things like we'll go on a date, how you treat the waitress, how you behave, how do you treat people around you, and being kind. If we go on a date together, checking up on me that I got home safely. Just little things, the little details, seeing that you're not just a Christian on paper, but in action. So I had a lot of short dates because I think it's important. I think also as I got older, I realized that as women, there is a time factor with us. So you can't afford to waste your time. My aunt used to always say, no time wasters. And it's true. You go on 1 date, 2 dates, and the intention is just to bed you. It's not to do anything that is really where you want to go. And that's their journey. It's not my journey. So next.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. Next. Delphine, so Joy just spoke a little of just some of her boundaries and just knowing. For you, what are some of those boundaries, or just maybe non-negotiables that you kind of like, do you know what? We're not about sitting here and making a big long list and having ridiculous expectations without reflecting on ourselves. But what for you are some things when you're dating now in your 30s that it's kind of like a non-negotiable?
I think really like having a man with follow through. So exactly what you were saying about like, you know, he does what he says and he says what he does. Faith is obviously like the most important thing in my life. So I have to see that in the other person. Everything else, I'm fairly open to God surprising me. But I think as well, it's trying to not date out of a place of scarcity, because obviously it's so easy to be like, there's no good men around, or like everyone's married, or like I'm getting older. And that leads you to these dates where you end up sitting there looking depressed because you're not excited, you're not passionate. And then you start considering people who God hasn't planned that person for you, but you try and force it. So you try and force like a square into a circle, and it's on your time, not on God's time. And it just makes both parties miserable. So I think operating from a place of abundance is where I'm trying to be. Like God has a plan for me, and if he wills marriage for me, it only takes one person, which, you know, there's a lot of men out there. So one, I just need one.
And there are good men out there.
There are.
They're good men. There are good
Exactly.
people.
Yes.
I just think, for me, I think it's important to ask God to order your steps and to guide me. That is really, really important, so that you are able to date with intention and with the right person. Because some people may end up being your friends, they're good people, but they may not end up being your husband. But I think it's really important to ask God to just guide you, like every step of the way. And that really, really matters. And I think it's just knowing your value in God, that God sees you as so precious. He's not going to give you to just anybody that comes along. Remember somebody said to me once, just close your eyes and get married. And I just thought, that's probably the worst advice I'd ever given.
Yeah.
But I also think, I was going to just jump on what you said about the list. What I found was that as I grew and matured in God, the list got shorter. So I loved how your list went shorter.
Yeah.
His faith, his intentions, and how he behaves.
Yeah.
Things like how tall he is, how much money he makes, all the other things. So then I just started crossing the list down and thinking those fundamental things are really important.
Yeah.
Because if he has faith, he will be kind. If he has...
it will all
it will all work
exactly,
together.
lead
So the list definitely gets shorter. So I loved when you said that,
Yeah, and I think there's a real societal pressure anyway on women, full stop. But then in our 30s and especially 40s, when we're single, it's kind of like there's something to be cured there, is the opinion
and there's like
that
a
lot of people have.
desperation as well that society puts on you, and you feel it. You feel that desperation, and when you act out of that place, you're not letting the Lord guide your steps. Like, I remember I had one situation with a man who was so lovely, and for me as well, I was like, well, he does tick all these boxes, but it just didn't feel right. My health wasn't good, and it's so interesting that, like, because we have such negative experiences in dating, that as soon as there's like a nice person, we're like, this must be the one. And I remember praying about it so much, and I really said to God, and I would never boss God around, but someone recommended to me, said, say to God, like, you love me, you love this man, like, is this your plan? Do you want us together? Please give me an answer, because I can't make it on my own. And he just told me so forthright, this is wrong. It was hard to walk away from that, because he was, you know, a faithful man, a good man, on paper, and the thing is, he will make someone so happy, but I didn't feel that excitement and that fire, which I knew that, like, you're going to need that.
I think the good thing about God is that he sees ahead of us. So some things that we don't understand now. So even when I'm speaking from hindsight. There are so many lessons for us to learn, but that's from a place of, okay, just trust me. Because to letting go of something that good, I had to let go of somebody, and it was painful. But I knew it just wasn't right. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. But God knows why he's done it. He sees the beginning. He sees everything ahead of us. So trusting him is so important. Even though it was painful, I still remember, even though it's painful letting go, God will always come back and recompense you and help you to understand why.
Yeah. And the thing is, God has really shown me that in other areas of my life. But for some reason, like even this podcast today, I was like, well, can I come and talk joyfully about this? Because obviously I'm still single. But then I was like, no, but this is exactly why I need to speak about it. So listening to Joy's story is just so inspiring, because it's like, no, you have to keep going, and eventually it will make sense.
Do you feel societal pressure and pressure from people? Because, you know, the society puts all kinds of pressures on us, but I think sometimes just pressure from people that we love, people that are close to us, not because they want the best for us, and sometimes they think the best for us is not being single anymore. So have you felt that pressure in your singleness?
100%. Oh my gosh, yeah. So like my brother, for example, I think he thought I was crazy with this last situation that happened, because he was like, this is a peaceful man, like he will give you a good life. But I was like, no, but I'm feeling like, I just don't feel it. And I just felt numb, and I was losing myself. It wasn't sustainable for me. And also just societally, like the communities that I roll in now, they're so Christian, and their values are so like beautifully traditional that, you know, I'm going to weddings of like 21-year-olds and, you know, some of my friends who are like 43, they've got like 5 kids and, you know, so I'm around all these like, you know, abundant families and weddings. And I've been to like 8 weddings, I think, in the past 2 months. It's been insane. And so it's really at the forefront. And I feel like my Instagram feed is all engagements, weddings, pregnancies. So it is there. And I also find it, I suppose, because I had this conversion back, when I see all my secular friends who are also now settling down, I'm like, oh, wait, that's not even fair, because, you know, an X, Y, and Z, then self-pity comes up and all these things. So I do feel that pressure, and I'm really trying to take myself out of it and just remember, like, it's God who, like, does all this timing. And so many stories in the Bible, women were waiting, aching and painfully waiting. And we need to remember that that's a beautiful part of the story as well.
It's our privilege to have these meaningful conversations, and we hope you're enjoying them. As a registered charity, it's thanks to our generous donors and partners that we're able to bring the Magnify conversations to you, and we know there is so much more ahead. If you've been impacted by any of the chats we've had with these amazing women and want to continue seeing them, why not consider supporting us?
You can find out how to by visiting www.magnifycollective.com/donate and then financially giving in any way you feel led to. We're so grateful to you for being with us in this season, and we hope you find real value in this episode.
In that environment, just touching on what you said of you've been to like 8 weddings in 2 months, wow, okay. And on your Instagram feed, it's babies, engagements, weddings. That does take a toll on us, whether we want it to or not.
100%.
It's not always the thing that we want to talk openly about. You know, I guess there can be jealousy, envy in the middle of that sometimes. How have you learned to, if you do feel like that, perhaps don't feel like that all the time, how have you learned to reconcile that with God?
I'm still really struggling with that, like comparison, jealousy, envy, and they're such awful. They say comparison's the thief of joy. And also, like, I don't want to look at my friend's amazing life and be like, oh, that's made me feel bad about my life. And so I just keep asking God, like, let me think of myself less, because like making everything about me is really quite selfish. And like, I want to rejoice with those who rejoice. But I'm not saying it's not been easy, you know, like I've had many close friends who I grew up with, so when we were kids, and they're having kids now, and it's strange for me to see that, because I'm like, oh, okay, like, and I feel like they have overtaken me in some way, and then that competitiveness comes out, and it's really ugly. So I think the way I'm trying to reconcile it is just surrendering to God and just saying, God, your dreams are way bigger than mine. Your plans for me are way better than anything I can imagine. I need to be patient, but it's so hard. Yes. It's really hard.
Yeah, and Joy, you must have had this as well. So close friends, family members, getting married, meeting someone, having kids, like especially through your 30s. How did you kind of navigate those times where you felt, like as Delphine said, okay, like I'm feeling maybe a bit left behind here, or like what's going on? How did you outwork that practically when those feelings came for you?
So I've been a chief bridesmaid and a bridesmaid numerous times. All my friends, bar one, got married. They've got loads of children. And my 2 younger sisters got married before me. The one thing is, I don't struggle with comparison, ever struggled with comparison. For me, I know that God's plans for all of our lives are really different. So comparing myself to my friends would be saying to God, you haven't done a good job with me. I want you to make me like somebody else. So it's not something I struggled with. I babysit. Even tomorrow is Monday. I'm looking after my sister's younger son. We're going swimming, and then we're going to go and play at one of those fun places and have lunch. So I've never struggled with comparison, because for me, I look at God to say, I know that you have a plan for my life. I know that you have a purpose for me. So when my friends are getting married, I'm ecstatic. They even give me the mic. One friend made me the MC at her wedding. She's got 4 children, and I've been a bridesmaid numerous times. I think that comparison is the thief of joy. For me, I have to trust that God has a great and unique plan for me. And I felt like I've been like that for as long as I can remember, knowing that God has made me unique, and my time will come, and my plans and my friends' plans are very different. So I think that it's important to focus on God and what He has for you, and to celebrate with those that are celebrating. I appreciate that this is not probably the norm. I don't struggle with comparison at all. And I knew I was single, so it wasn't my friend's wedding that would make me feel more single. Does that make sense? So it was nothing that I struggled with at all. And my friends are doing all sorts of different things, and we support each other along the way. But I think it's important to make sure that you look at what God has got planned for you on a one-to-one basis, and don't compare, because I think it's a really dangerous rabbit hole.
Yeah. Delphine, I want to come back a little bit to what you were saying about the breakup that you went through more recently, or that you felt something wasn't right. Knowing that, like, you're single, trying to embrace that, but also knowing, okay, I maybe want to settle down as well. what was it? Can you just tell us a bit of your experience of walking away from that? Because I just think being real, and other women in our community as well, they understand the tension of like, this isn't the same as when we're 23, 24, 25. When we're in our 30s, we've changed, we've matured, we've got different priorities, we've got a body clock. So the decision to walk away from a relationship earlier is not always easier, but sometimes easier when we're younger. Can you just talk us through a little bit of that process and just how you maintained your integrity in that?
Yeah, I think it was incredibly painful because I could really see like this man was fully committed, and I was like, wow, like I could be married in 6 months. I could have, whatever. I could be open to life, all these things. And it was like walking away from that dream, but realizing that I couldn't stay. It wasn't fair to this man who is amazing. We're still friends today. And I was using him. I was using him emotionally. Like I was using him as a crutch of, I have someone who I know wants to be with me, who could give me the life I want. And it was really I was doing a lot of reading, like, what is love? Like, what does love feel like? Because obviously I didn't want to have this immature, it's meant to be butterflies and amazing sparks all the time. I know it's not. So I was trying to be very mature about it because we were good friends. And I was like, surely that is all you need for a marriage. And I read this really old book. I think it was from like the early 1900s, written by a priest, and it's called Family Life. And in it, there was a paragraph that said, there are 4 things needed for a marriage: passion, emotional attraction, conviction, and suitability. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And I was looking, I was like, well, the conviction's there because I'm committed. I want to get married. He's committed. The suitability's there. He ticked all the check boxes. But I was like, the emotional attraction, the passion, there just was something missing there where we weren't really understanding each other. We weren't really on the same wavelength. And it was good for me to see it prescribed in such a step-by-step. I'm quite a black and white person, and I think in my reversion that was dangerous because I was very vulnerable and very easily impressionable and persuaded, and I overcorrected. So I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't been living right for this whole time. I'm going to do this. And it wasn't sustainable because it wasn't me acting as me. And I think in a way this relationship was also an overcorrection because I was like, well, I really desperately want to get married, and surely I can just sustain this from desire alone to get married, and that's not fair. The thing is that I actually don't think I was brave because in a way God cornered me because it was my body that started being like, no, your body doesn't lie. Like, because I was making all these decisions with my head and I thought my heart, and I was getting like ill. Like I was getting adult acne for the first time in my life, like, which I'm still recovering from. Like all these things were happening and I was like, this is really strange. And everything I was looking at was like anxiety, stress. And I was like, oh, but everything's going right. And so in a way, there was courage, but it was also God really being like, no, this is really, like I wasn't listening to the Holy Spirit, I was listening to my own desires. And then eventually I was like, I actually can't. I was worried about my health. Like I genuinely was like, I'm becoming like a shadow of myself.
Joy, you walked away from a relationship right before you met your husband. Yeah. In Christian circles, do you think, like, from the perspective of trying to give people the benefit of the doubt and maybe work harder at things sometimes, that sometimes we stay in relationships too long that really we know aren't for us, even if they're not bad, they're not the right thing?
Yeah, I can see how that happens, but it's not my experience. So the last person that I broke up with before I met my husband, he seemed to fit the box. He was a worker in church. My family knew of him, but it just didn't click in my soul. And I broke it off with him. But I think my family thought I'd lost the plot because they're like, what are you doing? But I think it's important to know the plan that God has for you and know that when you're by yourself, whether something is right for you or not. But I can see how that happens because the pressure externally to get married is really, really high. I remember I was 39 when I broke up with him and I got married. So the pressure is definitely high. So you hear people saying all sorts of things, but I think it's important to always go back to God because it was a tough decision, but it was the right decision. But I can see how that pressure is. But what you've got to think about is after you get married to that person that everybody else wants you to get married to, you've got the rest of your lives to live together. They're not going to be in your house. So you have to make sure it's a God decision, not a people decision. Yeah. Because you have to live with the consequences of that.
So you got married at 39?
Yes.
So you've been an adult for a long time then.
Very much so.
So I presume you had a house.
Yes, I
completely.
bought my first property when I was in my early 20s. I lived by myself for 15 years as a single woman. So I know the single journey inside out. So yeah.
And do you think, again, culturally, societally, it would seem to me anyway, that women are maybe just a bit more conditioned to be quote unquote wife material? Yeah. Whereas, so like, even taking that back to dating, was your experience like, did you feel like you were dating guys that were like established and they kind of knew what they would do? I don't know. What was your experience? Because you had that through your 20s and your 30s. As a mature woman, you're doing whatever you do, and you're not waiting to be a wife. But
yeah, I think that because of my Nigerian heritage, you're conditioned from university to get married straight afterwards, even though before university, you're not supposed to know any guy. As soon as you finish, you're supposed to get married and then have some babies. I don't know how that works out. So I think women are conditioned to be wives. I don't think the same is for men, but that's another story for another day. So I think all the attributes that people think, take care of a home, be able to cook, be able to just manage things, that's something that was inbuilt in us from childhood, I'd say.
When we think about the dating scene, the reality is that it takes personal energy to be present when you're dating, and you're doing that with intentionality. So you're not just kind of showing up like, you're thinking, you've already thought, do we think this person's the right person? Could anything come from it? Like, there's all those thoughts, and that effort has gone into it. How have you balanced and managed that tension between being in the dating scene, being present, being open-minded to different people, but then also in the middle of that, trusting God and that He has someone there for you as well?
Yeah, it's a really hard line, isn't it? Because there's like, oh, I want to be in every social scene where I could potentially meet a husband, to God, you have this, you've got it, I'm going to do what I believe you're calling me to do, and if it happens, it happens. So, for example, at the moment, I don't have any online profiles or anything like that. I have a deep feeling that God will arrange this meet cute for me at some point in real life. I do. And also, the energy isn't just in the dating, but it's in the work that I'm trying to do on myself. So I think it's really important that when we do have this checklist of, the perfect man, of course, no one is perfect, but the perfect man for me, I also need to think, am I worthy of him? Like, am I doing the work I need to do in order to attract this kind of man as well? So it can be all-encompassing, but I think if you focus on your own self-improvement, it removes that kind of desperation of looking out, and you're like, no, when I'm ready, when it is God's time for me, it will happen. And I think having that confidence, it makes you so attractive as well. And that's something that I'm slowly getting into, moving away from this, oh, I need to be here, here, and here, and having FOMO if I don't go somewhere. What if my husband was there? No, if I wasn't there and I didn't meet him, he wasn't my husband. He's not, the man that God has planned for me. So it's a very deep trust. And it's not easy, but I'm trying.
What does some of that inner work look like for you?
I listen to so many podcasts just about learning how we can deal with things, everything from communication to confrontation to figuring out what wounds and traumas we might have from our childhood and our adolescence and early 20s that could be contributing to anything. And even just looking back at some of my past relationships, like, what was my behavior like? Like, for me, I think there was sometimes a lack of respect, and a lack of respect is going to kill love so fast. And understanding why that is. So it's really like looking inside, and a lot of prayer, a lot of reading the Bible and trying to understand, like, how are these, women behaving? Like, there's this one line about Mary pondering these things in her heart. And I can be a very verbal person, and I want everyone's opinion and everything like that. And no, God is calling me to just ponder it and to be more peaceful.
And I think the narrative around singleness in your 30s can be that, oh, it's negative and it's hard and there's so much comparison. And of course, we've talked about those things. All those things are real. But I think there's a real opportunity and celebration in that too, that we probably don't hear as much about. So for you, Joy, in your 30s, what are some of the things that just were amazing opportunities and brought you great joy in your 30s when you were single, even though you were dating? Like, what were some of the beautiful things that were just great about your singleness?
I would say that your time of singleness is a time to focus on yourself, because when you're married, you have to consider your husband, and the other half. So during my 30s, early 30s, I started my business. I quit my job. I was an accountant in the city, quit my job, sold my house, trained at the London College of Fashion, and started my business and risked it all to just follow my dreams. I think if I was married, I'd have to speak to my husband. We'd have to plan everything because we have a bigger mortgage. I probably wouldn't have been able to take that leap of faith so boldly. And it gave me time to, running a business is a lot of work, to have time to just invest in the business and travel. I traveled a lot, did lots of courses, just a lot. It's time to live. You know, when you asked me earlier on, what's one piece of advice I was given? It was given by my late mentor. I remember I was about 35 years old, ironically. And I remember going to him, just checking my list. And I gave him a list of what I wanted in a man. It was quite short. And he said to me that you're golden. Get onto the dance floor of life. Your idea of a man is right, but get out there and just keep living. And that really gave me the confidence to live boldly. And I always have. I think it's important when you're single to do what God has asked you to do. Follow your passion. Do that course. Go on that holiday. Start that business. Because when you're married, your time is more divided. And it's a time to also really importantly get to know God more. I would say that my faith has been built more because of the breakup and me going into God and getting to understand God, to study God, to worship God, to know the word. I had a lot more time on my hands. So singleness is a great opportunity for you to enjoy life and to live life on your terms, obviously on God's terms as well, because we are guided by God, but you have a lot more time to live boldly. You have a lot more time to just, so if I wanted to go on holiday now, I'd have to speak to my husband. I'd have to ask him, how does that work with our diary? How does that, but when I was single, I went, my friend got married in Tobago. I went and stayed in Tobago. I stayed in the honeymoon hotel where they were staying. I enjoyed life. And I think it's important to know that your singleness is a time to live your life boldly and purposefully as well. I think that is so important. Don't sit and wait for somebody. Nobody saves you. Your husband doesn't save you. Only Jesus saves you. Because when you meet somebody, you're going to both be working together. But just get onto the dance floor of life, enjoy life and live in your purpose because God has a plan for you, whether you're single or whether you're married. I think that's so important. It's such a critical time. And I have really great memories. I was bold. I would just get on the plane and go and just do things. Even starting my business, people thought I'd lost the plot. You left your city job as an accountant on the 13th floor. I remember packing up my box in the office on the 13th floor in the city. I'm thinking, you've lost your mind. You're really going to follow your passion as a stylist and leave what you've done for how many years? But you know what? I really thank God for that boldness because and I think it's funny now talking in hindsight, it's important to live in your purpose when you're single because it makes you not be consumed by it or be drowned by it or be depressed by it. It makes you live your life with intention and with joy because that joy is also what attracts the person to you. Yeah, so yeah, my single days were fun.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that there weren't days where there were down days. I can probably count on my hand a couple of days. I had a couple of dark days where I remember just sitting in my room thinking, what about me, God? But I could count that on my hand. The rest of the years, I was single, living on my over 15 years, were joyful, were passionate, and they were exciting. So I would say that seize the moment and know that you're not going to have this moment again. It's a blessing, and there's many opportunities to just do you, guided by God. Yeah, guided by God. That's really, really important. And you can enjoy life, and you should enjoy life, and you should get on the dance floor of life because God has this purpose for you, and He wants you to live it out. I have no regrets how I lived my 30s as a single woman because I just think, I smile and think, yeah, you did that, girl. You went to that hotel by yourself as a single person, or you bought that car. I remember there was a time I was going to buy a car. Somebody said, oh, don't buy that car because guys will be scared of you. And then do you know what my mentor said? He put an example of Joyce Meyer. And he said, you're like Joyce Meyer, he said. But her husband is in the background supporting her. The husband that you have is not going to be scared of you. He's not going to think that, you know what, you're so confident. No, my husband supports everything that I do. He celebrates. If anything, he wants to push me out even more. So just jump onto the dance floor of life and just know that God is with you. that scripture that's Psalm 46, verse 5, it says, God is within you, you will not fail. Yeah, that's everything to me.
Amazing. Delphine, what brings you great joy being single in your 30s?
I think just being really present, not seeing it as a season of waiting. Of course, you are waiting, but you're waiting for something that could or could not happen. And I think just living really mindfully. So for me, it's been such a joyful time to really grow closer to like my mum and my sister. Like I used to just not really have that much time for them. And now I do. And it's such a gift. And I think as well, it's similar to what you were saying about the car. Like I used to have all these plans, like when I get married and have a family, I really want a dog. Like I grew up with dogs and they bring me a lot of joy. I have like a little side charity, a befriending service with dogs. So I was like, oh, you know, and I thought, no, I can't get a dog until like I'm married and have a family and other things. I wanted to design my life, but I kept thinking, no, let's wait because maybe you'll be married in a year or two. And now it's like, no, I just want to design my life how I want it now. And it's like, I've done that in terms of my career and my lifestyle. And it's just, as you say, Joy, like it's living there and thinking like, God, I am so grateful. Like, yes, I'm missing these things and I'm yearning for them. The desire is there, but wow, I'm grateful for this time. And it is such a special time where you can work on yourself, work in a relationship with God. And, you know, when you're a busy wife or you're a busy mother, you don't really have that time to reflect or to like meditate on these things.
Yeah, timing is so important. And because of this, I restudied the book of Ruth again. And what I found about Ruth was that she didn't go and hide when she lost her husband. She wasn't like Oprah thinking, you know what, I'm not going with Naomi because I need to find a husband. She just got busy doing the work. And it was in her work that Boaz saw her. And I think it's so important to just get on with life and it will happen. I always say that marriage is not the beginning and end of life. It's part of your journey. It's so part of your journey. Don't idolize it at all. It's part of your journey, and by God's grace, you'll get there.
Yeah. From both of your experiences of being single for like various amounts of time in your 30s, there will be many women in the Magnify community who are single, content, some who are looking to settle down. Wherever they are, what would be kind of your biggest piece of wisdom that you would offer to them at this time?
Okay, so I would say, first of all, know that you're wonderfully made. There's nothing wrong with you. Pursue your passion with purpose. And I would also say to anyone in their 30s that wants to get married and have children, I would say check your fertility status. It's not really spoken a lot about. And check that your egg health and in view of if you want to get your eggs frozen. I think that's really important conversation for anyone in their 30s. And know that God is within you. And he's there right by your side.
I think from that, I would also say, like, just be open to being surprised. Because there's so many ways, you know, like I always thought, oh, I would love 5 children, for example. And I don't know if that's going to happen. But maybe it's that I will marry, I don't know, a widower who has children already. Or maybe I'll get married and I'll adopt. You know, like there's all these different ways that these dreams that we've had put in us could actually come into actuality. Yeah. So I think just being open to being surprised. Same with like the checklist, right?
This has been such a helpful conversation, just hearing your stories. But lastly, before we kind of finish, I know you both pursuing different things. We're a community of women, we want to support you. Just, are there any current endeavours that you've got on the boil at the minute that our Magnify community can support you with?
Well, I own a style and image consultancy called Potential You. And it's really about empowering women to love their bodies and to dress in a way that makes them feel confident. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I absolutely love doing. I'm working with a new celebrity of late, which is exciting. But really, it's just an empowering place for women to feel confident about themselves and to know that you don't need to subscribe to the images that we see in the world. So that's really what I'm doing at the moment. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Delphine, how about you? How can the Magnify community get behind you?
So my background is really in writing and also presenting. So I do a lot of stuff on YouTube. And also I'm just trying to really share my own transformational journey and being honest about that as well. God keeps placing me in places to talk about dating and trying to find holy love in the modern dating era, like today. So I do try and talk about it a lot and really understand like what the Bible says and what is expected of us in today's society. and how we can really live that out. So I would love a follow on Delphina's Typing on Instagram, and you can see what I'm up to with like my side little charities as well. But I'm just trying to get my creative passions out there and just seeing what God is leading me to.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for being part of this conversation. I know it will be so helpful to our community. So thank you both for sharing your stories.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's been an honour to see Magnify grow to where we are today. If you've loved this conversation and want more from Magnify, why not check out our print magazine?
Across the 10 editions, we've had the privilege of featuring a multiple of changemakers and pioneers such as Suzanne Hendricks, Jerry Lorenzo, Joe Malone, and many more.
The magazine is a beautiful physical product that makes the perfect coffee table companion to complement your space.
And even more than the look, it creates the perfect excuse to take some time to read a collection of timeless features that will enrich your life whatever stage you're at. Head to magnifycollective.com/shop to purchase your copy now.
The Magnify Conversations mean so much to us as a team. It really impacts us every day and encourages us so much when we see your comments, your DMs, and to know that these conversations are truly making an impact in the best times of your life, but also challenging, is such an honour. We hope you've enjoyed today, and we can't wait to see you next Monday.